Childhood innocence is a very precious thing. Far too often, this innocence is stolen away from children without their consent. However, sometimes it's given up by the child's own hands after committing awful crimes that land them in prison for life. Before we get started, make sure you hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. Joshua Phillips was just 14 years old when he committed an unspeakable crime. He lived across the street from an 8-year-old girl named Maddie. He knew the girl quite well and their families were friends with one another. In November of 1998, Joshua was home alone while his parents were at work. Maddie knocked on the front door and Joshua asked to play ball with her. The two played in the front yard for a while, but tragedy struck when Joshua hit the ball and it struck Maddie in the face. She began to cry and scream for help, and even though it was an accident, Joshua began to panic, fearing that his alcoholic and abusive father would punish him when he got home from work a short while later. Instead of calling medical professionals for help, Joshua took the girl inside and proceeded to claim her life. He hid her body under his waterbed, hoping his father would never realize what had taken place. The girl was reported missing immediately, but no one knew that Joshua was to blame. A large search party was organized, with Joshua offering his assistance in trying to locate the girl. After a few days, the search party was called off by police, though many locals continued to search for her. Joshua's mother entered his room one afternoon to clean up. She noticed that his waterbed appeared to be leaking. She lifted the bed and discovered the awful crime that Joshua had committed. She ran across the street and called the police. They showed up at Joshua's high school and arrested him. He was taken to trial and was sentenced to life without parole, though he will be eligible for reconsideration in 2023. When taken in for questioning, Joshua explained that his only reason for taking the girl's life was a fear of his father. He felt it was far easier to harm the girl than face his father's abusive punishment. A 14-year-old boy named Antonio Barau was convicted of taking the life of his 78-year-old great-grandmother with a hatchet and was seen breaking down in court during his sentencing. He was sentenced to a minimum of 36 years in prison, though officials say it's unlikely he'll ever be released. The young man spoke up in court, attempting to read an apology letter from his family, but couldn't hold back tears. He then passed the letter off to his attorney, though the attorney began sobbing as well. The boy was accompanied by his friend Nathan. The grandmother had allegedly invited the boys into her home, and when she turned her back, Antonio hit her in the head with a hatchet. He then ran to the bathroom because he wasn't feeling well, and when he came back in the room, his friend had begun attacking the woman as well. The boy's friend was also convicted for the attack and faces 20 years to life. According to reports, after taking the woman's life, the two stole her car. They also visited a nearby pizza shop before going home to face what they had done. This case is incredibly tragic, so viewer discretion is advised. Brian Lee Draper and Tory Adamsick were friends from high school. In September of 2006, they devised a plan to claim the life of a classmate after school one evening. Their only motive was fame. The two young men learned that Cassie would be home alone at a family member's home on the night of September 22, 2006. Cassie was asked to homestead at the home of her aunt and uncle in exchange for a hefty payment. Brian, Tory, and Cassie's friend Matt were all invited to the home to watch a movie. During that time, Brian secretly unlocked the basement door as he and Tory had other plans in mind that would take place later that evening. Brian and Tory left sometime that afternoon, claiming they were going to the local theater to watch a film instead. However, they went home to collect weapons and returned to the house. When they returned, they entered through the unlocked basement door and waited for Matt to leave. After he left, the boys cut off the power to the house. Cassie was terrified but felt it was her duty to remain in the home. Regardless of the power outage, it didn't take too long for the teens to begin their plan to attack Cassie, eventually claiming her life around 11 p.m. When they were taken into questioning, the boys explained that the Columbine massacre was a major inspiration for their attack, explaining that they wanted the fame of being such cold-hearted criminals. Both were later convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Gavin Ramsay, a teenager from Wadsworth, was recently sentenced to life in prison after he was convicted of taking the life of a 98-year-old woman who lived next door to him. Gavin pleaded guilty and was tried as an adult back in January of 2019. Gavin was just 17 years old at the time and was found guilty of burglary, kidnapping, abuse of a body, and obviously for taking the woman's life. The woman's body was discovered inside her home after she had been reported missing by a relative who lived out of town. Police and investigators say that Gavin walked into the woman's home as it was left unlocked and took her life by suffocation. He then took her body and placed it into a closet and covered her up with clothing that was found nearby. He then proceeded to take her wallet, leaving her there to be discovered by police several days later. He was quickly linked to the attack, arrested, and sent to trial. His case was concluded, and he was sentenced in less than a year. Lionel Tate is widely considered the youngest person in America to ever be sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Lionel's case is quite complicated and many question if his sentencing was just. In July of 1999, Lionel's mother was babysitting a 6-year-old girl. His mother left him in charge of entertaining the girl for a short time, with the two hanging out downstairs in their home while the mother took care of the chores around the house. Lionel and the girl were getting along great, but things took a dark turn when Lionel's mother shouted for the two of them to quiet down. About 45 minutes later, Lionel ran to his mother claiming that the young girl was not breathing. His mother couldn't understand how this happened, and Lionel explained that the two had been wrestling and she hit her head on the table. Lionel insisted that this was an accident, but later, court hearings would determine that his actions were intentional. After the young girl was reviewed by a coroner, it became clear that Lionel acted out in a fit of rage against the girl. Before long, Lionel was being tried as an adult in a felony case that saw him being locked away for the rest of his life with no chance of parole. However, Lionel's case does not end there. In 2004, his sentence was overturned and he was resentenced to house arrest. He was to remain in his home for 1 full year and would then be placed on probation for 10 years. It didn't take long for Lionel to violate the terms of his agreement. Just 8 months later, he was arrested after he had exited his home. When police found him, he was carrying an 8-inch weapon, though it's unclear if he had any intention of using it. It's unclear why he was not held accountable for this action, but the judge decided to let the situation slide. In May of the following year, he was arrested once again after he threatened the life of a pizza delivery man. He was sent through court once again and was sentenced to 30 years for his crimes and the violation of his probation. He's currently in prison and will remain there until he's an elderly man. 16-year-old Bobby Bostic, with the help of a close friend, robbed a group of people in Missouri back in 1995. No one was seriously injured in the crime, with Bobby and his friend being captured later that day and taken in for questioning. Both of the boys were offered a plea deal that would see them being given a sentence of 30 years behind bars. The friend accepted this offer, though Bobby refused and wanted to have his sentence reduced. At his appeal, Judge Evelyn Baker heard his case and deemed it fitting that he received a total of 241 years behind bars for his crime. Many would argue that this amount of time does not seem reasonable, given that no one was hurt, though the judge disagreed and handed down a sentence that, to this day, remains the longest sentence in Missouri history. He'll be eligible for parole if he lives to be 112. Anthony Dixon's case is one of the strangest we've ever seen. When Anthony was 14 years old, he was arrested and charged with a sexual crime. However, the prosecution team could offer no irrefutable evidence against him that proved he was involved in the crime. Regardless, he was pushed through the court system without ever receiving a fair trial. His legal advisor highly recommended that he plead guilty, otherwise he'd be facing a possible death penalty. Anthony took this advice and decided to plead guilty. In 2018, a judge overruled his initial sentencing and lessened his sentence to 15,679 days behind bars, the exact amount of time he had already been incarcerated. The judge insisted that, as teens, we're not the same people we are in adulthood. She feels as though Anthony deserves another chance at freedom now that he's 57 years old.